think it's okay now.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
Now, Mary's had a hard night, so she hasn't been asleep very much at all last night, so we'll see how we go today. She's pretty tired. Yeah. You guys all right?
How did everyone feel after yesterday?
Bit of challenging info.
Yes.
Bit of challenging.
Challenged, yes.
Yeah.
More challenge the first day, I'd say.
More challenge the first day?
Yeah.
It was difficult the first day because of the amount of spirits interfering with our discussion on the first day.
Yeah.
But yesterday was better. It was less. Once we talk about the spirits' interference, they go, oh, they know we're there. Whoops. And normally, people to not know they're there, you know. It's a power thing for many spirits to not know that you don't know they're around. And when you do know they're around, it's like, oh. And also it's interesting spiritually because when you do know they're around, there's sort of this light that goes around them that comes from you to them. And it's sort of like they're in a spotlight. And so it's sort of like, whoa, you know, because they're used to being sort of not so like lit up with regard to, you know, everyone knowing. So it's just interesting in that regard. And you want to ask? Yeah. Microphone. Who's doing our mics
Who's
today?
going to do our mics today? Who would like to? Any volunteers?
I'll do it.
Yes, great.
I mean, I'm sort of making. Would you like to sit?
Now, yeah, it might be better if you sit somewhere closer, or what we find generally is
I
sort
can
of
sit here.
Yeah, or at the back. You know, sometimes that's quite good because you see where
you
the
see
hands
where the
go
hands
up.
are. Yeah.
So if you just find a positive,
But you need the
the
mic.
You need to take the mic. And the first person is Nellie here at the front.
Yeah, that's right. And the first person's Nellie over here. Yeah. It's hard to get used to being a mic runner.
It is.
And you're now in the way of the cameras.
Yeah.
I hope you guys are up.
So I was curious if when we notice for ourselves that we are influenced by spirits, does it have the same effect of that spotlight?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it does.
So
Yeah, it does.
that helps a lot.
That helps, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's far better to not ignore it than it is to ignore it. Yep.
Yeah. And it helps create that space where you can question, what do I really feel or what's being impressed upon me?
Yeah. So it also helps you determine whether you're getting information from an external source or whether it's just, you know, your feelings alone.
Yeah, I think that's still hard for me to, to see if it's mine or if it's someone else.
Yeah.
Because it has been.
Yeah, for most people on Earth, it's almost impossible to do that.
Yeah.
Most people on Earth are not educated very well in terms of how to tell the difference. And so, for the majority of people, in fact, for many of you in the past, many of the decisions you've made in your life have actually been influence decisions, but you felt they were your own decisions. And spirits really like you feeling that. The spirits I'm talking about the darker spirits who like to influence you in those directions, they really like you thinking that it was your idea. Because if it's your idea, then you'll do it more. And so if you become aware that it's their idea, then you go, oh, you start thinking, well, if it's somebody else's idea, is it a good idea? You start analysing it more. But when you think it's your own idea, then of course there's less possibility or chance or desire for you to analyse it.
And there's 3 types of influence you might be under. One is sort of influence from spirits who are earthbound usually, who are selfish and they want to meet addictions through you, like we talked about yesterday. Sometimes there's spirits who are maybe from your family line who've passed, or people who think they're well-meaning, maybe they're attracted to your set of beliefs or your hobbies, or they feel like they've got something in common with you, but they're not very developed in love themselves, and then they decide, oh, Nellie's kind of...
Go and do that, Nellie.
This will be good for you, Nellie, because
Yeah.
in my wisdom, you know, quote unquote wisdom, that they haven't really developed much beyond their earth existence, and they think, well, some things didn't work out well for me, so you should do the other things, Nellie, and just go and do those things. And they can be actually a negative influence on your life, because really they're not really deeply developed or really thinking about your best interest. They're just, like we talked about the parenting yesterday, trying to prevent their mistakes, you having their mistakes, if you like, but they're not really considering love in that process. And then, of course, there's really positive spirit influence, and they don't want to hide the fact that they're spirits. They want to say, hey, I'm your guide, I'm here to help, and this
But also they're far less pushy,
Yeah.
far less,
Yeah.
you know, demanding, far less pressuring,
Far less.
very respectful of free will, and so they won't boss you around. They just sort of sometimes remind you of things. In the case of your guardian, they'll remind you when you're in when you're in danger, things like that. They'll say you're in danger, you know, and give you a feeling straight away that you are, so that, you know, your guardian's trying to protect your physical life on Earth so you can live as long as possible on Earth, so you can learn as much as you can while you're here. And your guides, though, they come and go based on your belief systems. Yeah, so if your belief systems change, your guides change.
So the key is like to really get more understanding of love, and with help of the conscience to see what information I get is actually loving or not.
Yes, like we talked about yesterday, remember, measure the information via what you know about love, truth, humility, faith. You know, God's love, if you've received some, measure the information you're receiving against those things. And you can also measure it against other principles, like is it compassionate, is it kind, is it understanding, so these are all sub-points of love. Or is it open, is it transparent, is it honest? Those sub-points of truth. So is it like encouraging me to feel my emotions or discouraging me to feel them? Is it encouraging me towards being loving to others, or is it discouraging me to do that? Is it encouraging me to be selfish? You know, because obviously if it's encouraging you to be selfish, then obviously not in harmony with the ideals. So the best way to work out who's influencing you is to have a really steadfast connection to the ideals, and then try to measure everything with what you know about those ideals. Try to measure everything via those ideals. This is also very important for many of you who have been involved in different kinds of spiritual teachings. It's very important to analyse these spiritual teachings from a perspective of love, because if love is not contained within the teaching, then the teaching from God's perspective is false. So it is automatically false if there is no love in it. An example of that is in a lot of churches nowadays, if you do the wrong thing, you might get excommunicated. In other words, nobody talks to you anymore. They all sort of ban you from their lives, and well, that is obviously out of harmony with love. So obviously that teaching is false. Another teaching is like in the Christian faith, hellfire. You know, tormented forever for doing to do 100 years of wrong things on earth and then get tormented forever is not very fair, is it? Not very just. And also it's not very loving to get tormented. If any of you have ever put your hand over a fire, you know that it's hard to bear it for very long, right? And so you know that if they're saying that God does that, then that teaching is obviously false. And another teaching from Christianity that's obviously false is that there is a devil. That is false. God didn't create beings that then could become evil through no process, you know, and which is what the Bible claims. So that's an obvious fault. And there's many other reasons why it's also false, besides the fact that in the 2,000 years I've been alive, I've never seen a devil. So you know, that is an obvious false teaching. If somebody in New Age philosophy, you've got the reincarnation beliefs, and this is something we'll talk about today with some spirits, but you can see when you analyse the teachings from the perspective of love, that many of those teachings are also obviously false. And then you also, if you look at a lot of so-called New Age gurus nowadays, they promote promiscuous sexual behaviour. And this behaviour obviously hurts, people hurt from it afterwards and feel ashamed of it afterwards and things like that. And oftentimes you can see that this promotion of this kind of behaviour comes from the guru himself wanting sexual adulation or control or sexual activity with his listeners. And obviously it's selfish, so obviously those teachings are also false. So the key is to analyse everything through these principles, because if you do, you will actually be a lot safer in your life on earth, and also you'll be a lot less worried about your passing, because there'll be less to deal with upon passing, because you haven't engaged unloving, sinful behaviour on earth by mistake. You know, it's easy on earth to be easily led. You know, particularly what we find is many of you have sort of like an innocent search for truth feeling within you. Many of you feel that way. But you are also being easily led, going from one to another, to another, to another, because you're not measuring the information you get via the principles. You're not sort of looking at the principles and going, is this thing that I'm getting taught in harmony with those principles? And so it's very important to really hold on to those principles in your life, and then to measure everything via those principles.
Yeah. And I found, Nellie, that it's a process as well. This is where that compassion with yourself and sort of a curiosity about what's happening for you really helps, because initially sometimes we're very detuned to, well, what is love really, or to the conscience, and being open to the facts, if you like, that we've described about there's these different kinds of influence and the conscience does exist, and having an attitude of experimenting and learning and reflecting, sort of like what we said to Tim the other day, when you have an experience that didn't go that well, don't just try and shut it down and move on. Try to understand it in a compassionate way. Well, what happened there, and how did I feel in certain situations and afterwards, and what can I learn from that in relation to the principles of love, truth, humility, faith and action. So yeah, it's a developing sense of who's around you, and whether that influence is positive or extremely negative. Because sometimes we have the feeling, especially when we have a lot of fear, that the people, the spirits around us who are helping to feed addictions to avoid fear are good. We have this false idea that they're good. And when loving spirits come around and go, Nellie, this will be good for you to have your fear here, or you're just letting fear restrict your actions here, we often feel like, oh no, that's very pressuring, when actually it's someone kindly presenting the truth. I don't know if you've had that experience already, where someone, possibly not because you haven't had much to do with Jesus and I, but where we present a truth to you in a very kind of calm and relaxed way, but it feels ginormous and a massive problem and attack because it's triggering a feeling in you. Yeah. And so we've had people who then, like, they have a big dramatic response to that, and then they re-listen to a recording and they say, wow, you really didn't say very much, or you just said a very mild thing, but I felt like it was the end of the world. Yeah, so this can happen with your spirit friends as well, where you sometimes, you have to be very self-reflective about, okay, am I responding to avoid fear? Am I responding to meet an addiction? Or, you know, yeah, what's really happening?
Most people on earth feel that if somebody meets their addiction, that person loves them. That is very common. Almost everybody feels that. And people who are in good development in the spirit world will not meet your addictions. So because of that, most people feel when those nice spirits come around them, that those spirits aren't nice, because they're encouraging them to not meet their addictions. And so, you know, it's really interesting to watch sometimes where we see people like saying, oh, there's this spirit who keeps on pressuring me, attacking me, and we ask them, we obviously can feel the spirit, so we know, that that's not the case. But we ask them, like, why do you feel pressured and attacked? Because I'm really afraid of this thing, and they're pushing me to do this thing, and they seem to be pushing me to try to do this thing all the time that I'm really afraid of. They're not very kind to me, and I just want to try to get away from them. And can you please tell us how to get away from them? And yet that person might be the only spirit around them who is actually in a good place. Yeah. So it's we find it very interesting, people's interactions on Earth between spirits and people on Earth. Obviously, Mary and I have observed these interactions for 2,000 years, and it's very interesting watching all of the interactions. Many physical ailments are caused directly by spirit attachments with people. Many childhood problems, child issues, things like ADD, ADHD, all those kind of things. Many of them are spirit overcloakings. You get also, there's many times when a medical profession can't find pains in a person, and frequently those times are because spirits are causing that pain through some connection. And so, there's also many mental health problems that are caused, like schizophrenia and psychotic episodes, and these kind of episodes often caused directly by interactions with spirits as well. And so, if you look at a lot of the problems that people on Earth actually have, a lot of them are due to this unseen influence that most people on Earth don't even believe happens, and yet it's happening all the time.
Yeah, and if we go back to the start of your question, the lack of belief that it happens empowers the spirits the most. Yeah. So your awareness that, maybe I'm being influenced can always help you, just as a question.
Yeah, and I didn't have personal interaction with you yet, but I do feel, because you have a high standard of love, I do feel already that I'm triggered in not getting my addictions met.
Yeah. A lot of people don't like Mary and I for that reason.
Yeah.
They sort of think, they're going around teaching, they should meet my addictions, sort of thing.
I should leave here feeling really good. It doesn't always happen.
No.
I just realized that, this is just what I do all the time to feel good.
Yeah.
I just ponder how can I then, see that with my spirits around me,
Well, what you just recognised is the very first way you see it.
Yes.
Recognising in yourself the desire to meet addiction rather than the desire to live in harmony with principle is the very first way in which you start detecting what's going on for you around you spiritually.
Yeah. And this is what I mean about being compassionate with yourself. It's a process. It's a process of increased sensitivity, increased self-reflection and self-honesty, and and if you stay in that process, before you know it, in a few years you have a much bigger perspective of what's going on, and a much more clear relationship with yourself and potentially with God as well.
If any of you are interested in reading literature about spirit channelings, and I'm sure many of you have done that in the past, right? What I would recommend, the best literature, the most truthful literature on Earth regarding that's come from the spirit world has been the Paget messages. So I'd recommend sort of reading them first, but many of you will find it difficult initially, probably. J or G? On our website, if you look under resources, buried deep in there somewhere, at the moment, our website, we've been in the process of modifying our website, but the person I was working with modifying our website died last year. And so we've sort of come to a screaming halt with the modification of our website because of that. Mary and I don't really have the time to do it ourselves. But So, but buried deep in the resources section of the website. So our website is divinetruth.com. So just write that. From divinetruth.com, you'll find, nearly 2,000 hours of video, and lots and lots and lots of books. Some of which we agree with, and some we've put on there because they've become out of print and they're not available anywhere else. But the Paget messages, the original Paget messages, which were channeled by us to Paget in the period from 1914 to 1921, around about, in that period, 1921-22. They are the most accurate material because he was the only person in the entire, from the time I left Earth in the first century to now, he was the only person that I could get actually some accurate channelings with on Earth in that period of time, and who wrote them down, and who had a friend who was willing to publish them. So there were other people we did get to speak with, obviously, in that period of time of 2,000 years, but unfortunately, they either didn't write the material down or the material was not published and so not shared. So the Paget messages, they contain many of the truths that I'm sharing with you are contained within them. Of course, Mary and I shared them, and other, you won't see Mary in the Paget messages, unfortunately, because James Paget himself didn't really believe that I had a soulmate, and so he wasn't really interested in channeling my soulmate. And so Mary, he was very, he was a very Christian man before we started channeling to him, and as a result of that, some of the messages are sort of tainted a little bit with Christianity, including the fact that he didn't really believe that I had a soulmate. He knew I must have, because we told him in the messages that every person who ever comes to Earth has a soulmate, but he never thought to ask to talk to my soulmate. And so Mary didn't get to speak in the Paget messages. But others who you've probably heard of, who are ones of the 14 who have returned, like Luke, he got to speak. But unfortunately, again, Paget never thought to ask for his soulmate either. So that tells you something about Paget's injuries. It's a very, unfortunately, very male-dominated injuries, not very open to female, unfortunately. So when you read them, take that in mind. But he did channel many women, but only the women who were mentioned in the Bible. So even some people like my own mother and John the Baptist, his mother, people who were mentioned in the Bible, he did channel those, along with many others that weren't mentioned in the Bible. Actually, he did channel too, but unfortunately, he never thought to channel the soulmates of John, Luke, myself, Cornelius, because Cornelius is in the messages as well a few times, and John Mark as well is in the messages a few times. Never thought to channel his soulmate. Other people who you would know as the apostles, like Matthew, he channeled Matthew, but not his soulmate. So even though we were teaching him about soulmates, he didn't think to channel about the soulmates of the persons involved. But these are still the most accurate messages to this day that have been actually transmitted to from Spirit. So I would recommend you persist with reading them. My suggestion is, when you receive divine love, you'll find that the import of the messages will change for you after that time. So initially it's going to be quite difficult to read them, and then after you've received God's love, you'll find you'll enjoy them far more. Now there's unfortunately there's people now modifying those messages, so they get the message and then they take out paragraphs and they put in their own interpretation in some areas. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the published material you can find surrounding the Paget messages now have been modified from the original. So on our website we do have PDFs of the most original material, but unfortunately we don't have books that you can buy because we haven't got anybody to help us publish books at this stage. So So they are downloadable as PDFs, and they're also individually on the website. You can read them as individual messages as well. So that's Padgett Messages. The next thing I would recommend you read material that was written by Robert James Lees. These are not material about divine love, but a lot of people who read them think they are, but they're not. They're more about progress in natural love. But the material, there's 3 books. There's a trilogy. The first one is Through the Mists. And that's about the passing of the man who channeled to Robert James Lees the material. And he tells about his experience when he first passed, basically. And then the next book is The Life Elysian. Which describes the same man's, Frederick is his name, the same man's progress through the second and the third spheres and 4 spheres. So through, and when I say progress, he himself wasn't always making the progress. Sometimes he was helped by a spirit to see the place, and then he described it. And then the last book that he channeled was The Gate of Heaven. And the spirit himself at that time of channeling felt that he was channeling about the transition between the 6th and the 7th sphere. But that's not actually the case. And we still want to have a chat with him about some of the material. We did have a chat with him some time ago, but we're hoping to have some chats with him soon about that. And he wants to have some discussions with us because he is now a celestial spirit as far as we understand. But when he thought he became one then, when he didn't. So, and that's common. Spirits believe they've made certain transitions without really understanding they haven't made those transitions. So Tim, you want to ask if we just...
Just with the microphone, just got to come and get it when she's finished.
I just want to add, because the English is quite tough, the native speaker, there's a German translation for the German-speaking
Okay,
people.
so I know these have been translated into a number of different languages.
Where did you access that, Tim, for the German speakers?
I don't remember, but I bought books online
On
Amazon.
For the Padgett Messages?
for
the Robert James Lees
Yes.
material, yeah. The Padgett Messages, I think, have been made available in, I think, about 7 different languages. Spanish is one.
French, I think.
German, I think. I don't know all the languages, but I'm not certain of their translations, of course. The same applies to the Robert James Lees material. They have been translated into some different languages, but again, you may lose some accuracy in the translations, but they are in different languages. So this is more about divine love. This is more about progress in natural love, actually. But a lot of people, when they read it, they think it's about progress in divine love. So
And it's quite lovely descriptions of the spirit world and how...
that are quite accurate, actually. Quite accurate descriptions of the spirit world. The Gate of Heaven, in particular, does not properly describe... It starts to talk about my life a bit in the Gate of Heaven and the process of being born again, and that description is not accurate. So you just need to bear in mind it's all channeled material. So now there are other things that are really interesting reads. So there's one called by Dr. Carl Wickland, and by the way, many of these things happened prior to like 1930. So these are very old books, very hard to come by because of that. For that reason, The Paget messages were from 1914 to 1922 or so, as I said. The Robert James Lee's material happened over a period of, I think it was 1898 to something like 1912 or something like that, was this material here. And a lot of it was sort of lost for a while and then reprinted later, by people who found it and then reprinted it. And the Dr. Carl Whitland material is all in the middle 1920s and 1930s, and it's about a doctor and his wife. His wife was a channel, and he was a doctor, a physician. And they found that many of their patients were exhibiting symptoms that, because his wife was a medium, she knew that it was a spirit attachment that she could see. And so he started experimenting, and it's very interesting, he started experimenting with being a doctor by dealing with the spirits involved with the person as well as the person. And it's very interesting then what happened as a result of that in terms of how they cured people and what cures occurred and how rapidly those cures occurred. And Dr. Carl Whitland, so I'll just write that one down too. The book is called, is it Carl with a C, I think. I'm not sure it's a C or a K.
It's on.
I think it's a C.
It's on the website anyway.
Yeah, and the book is
30
Years Among the Dead. And they did this for a period of 30 years. Him and his wife, he was a physician, and they met many, as you can imagine, many thousands of people who they had direct interaction with. But they wrote a book that I think contains about 20 to 30 examples of different people they met and what happened to them. And now Dr. Carl Whitland and his wife are now celestial spirits, but when they wrote the book, of course, they weren't. They were on Earth when they wrote the book. They personally wrote the book. So
it's actually transcripts. A lot of it is transcripts.
A lot of it's transcripts. Yeah. They actually had a person typing up what Dr. Carl Whitland said to the spirit via his wife, and what the spirit said through his wife. And so they it's a very interesting transcript, but it does take a bit of diligent reading to sort of understand what's going on sometimes.
Initially,
it's quite enjoyable.
It's an easier read than the other
two
material.
Yeah, particularly if you're not yet sort of very developed in principle, but you'll find the more you develop in love and principle and truth, these books will become more attractive. And in fact, I've personally read these books 30 times, because every time I read them, I remember new things about my own life and stuff like that. So it's helped a lot in terms of our memory, in terms of remembering our spirit life and just triggering memories of our spirit life more than anything else. And these books here, obviously, we wrote, so we remember them well. And when I say we wrote, we channeled them to James Paget. And so we remember well what we were saying to him. And I would recommend, if you're interested in interactions with spirits and you're interested in knowing more about the spirit world and knowing more how it works in a true law-based sense, that would be the material I'd start with. Julius?
Can you say something about the accuracy of the Judas of Cariath by Hans Radak?
Yes, well, that's a modern, there are more modern channelings. That was by a man who was in, I think, Ecuador at the time.
Colombia, yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, I think
Ecuador or Venezuela, I can't quite remember. He supposedly channeled Judas, who was involved in my death, and many of the messages are from Judas, but not there is details that are not accurate in the messages because of I forget the man's name now.
Hans
Radix, yeah. Because of Hans's spiritual condition, and he had a very intellectual view of receiving God's love, and so hadn't received much, had not received any of God's love while he's channeling the material. So, but he had an openness to channeling, and he also had an openness to the concepts, and so as a result of that, a lot of the material it's good to read, but not as accurate as the Paget messages. There was also channelings done in the 50s by a man called Dr. Samuels, who purported to also, he was also at one point a custodian of the Paget messages on Earth. Again, many of those messages are quite accurate, and I did channel to Dr. Samuels, but a lot of times I couldn't get any emotional connection with him at all. It was all just intellectual because he was so focused on his intellect. He's passed now, but he was so focused on his intellect. It was difficult to share any depth emotionally with him about the truth. With Paget, he was more emotional because his wife had died, and as a result of that, he was quite emotional, particularly right at the beginning. We started channeling with him, and that actually helped us a lot to channel material that was more soul emotionally based. Judas is saying.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I was following on from something you said to Nelly about, like, these persons are very kind when they're not meeting my addictions. Something that's been with me for quite a while, that I really have this struggle or dread with God being kind or firm, or my guides are someone loving. So is this like...
God's the most loving being in the universe. So God...
Yeah, but you're talking about God being firm with you.
Yeah, so it's almost like I
God's also the most firm being in the universe.
Yeah, so I it's almost like I must have that so twisted up that I'm not getting those two together. So it's like when
most people don't. Most people don't see that someone who's consistent is consistently the same and will not budge on a principle. Most people feel that person is uncompromising and therefore not very loving.
Yeah.
But see, on Earth, one of the false definitions of love is compromise. If you've got marriage problems and you go and see a psychologist, one of the first things I recommend is how much are you compromising? Who's not compromising here? Right? Now, God doesn't compromise on any single issue, not a single one. He is also the most loving person in the universe, so that should tell you something about compromise. Compromise is actually an evil thing to do from God's perspective, and not a good thing. So this is an interesting concept that most people on Earth in relationships don't understand. But again, God's standard love, very different to ours. Because God isn't compromising, and you feel like you would like someone who's going to compromise with you. Now, any celestial spirit also will not compromise with you. When I'm with you, do I compromise with you?
No, so I was reflecting on the fact that it feels like if I'm resistive, and then you're quite like whoosh, like yeah. But if I'm more open, maybe then I just feel more.
Correct. Like you feel more desirous of truthful information when you're open, and therefore you feel less worried about that information when it comes to you. But when you're resistive, you've set up an opposition immediately, and then the person who's speaking to you must, if they're going to continue speaking to you, will need to overcome your opposition. So
and also let you, like when you're more open, you're by definition you're saying, oh, I'm seeking truth. When you're resistive, you're actively saying, I don't want more truth. So the loving person has to be a lot firmer about what the truth is. Otherwise, you're sort of going to be pushing back, and they need to have a firm line. Whereas when you're open, they can present the truth to you, and it doesn't have to be like a firm line because you're receiving it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I almost have a physical image of like if there's a wall and you have to overcome that, it's like...
Well, I don't feel it's overcoming it. It's standing firm on a principle.
Standing firm on a principle.
If I was trying to overcome your resistance,
Yeah, right.
I'd be breaking the laws of free will.
Correct.
I just need to be firm for what the matter is with you.
Yeah.
You feel that as pushy, but it's not. I'm not saying you must change, or if you're, I'm just saying, no, this is how it is. And that's...
Most people on earth want to weasel out of things. You know what I mean by that? It's like it's sort of like, if here's a truth right here, most people on earth want to go, I'll go around it, and I'll go right around it like that, and I'll go, around it like that.
Don't you understand?
And I'll go distract myself about it down here. And what you'll find is the more firm a person is for truth, they won't let you do that.
I'll keep bringing you
They'll
back.
keep bringing you back. There's a truth. There's a truth. There's a truth. They won't buy the weaseling around or the manipulation that you engage in order to avoid truth. And for most people on earth think that is uncompromising, and they also think that's opinionated, and they also think that that's arrogant, and they also think so. Pushy. A lot of people on earth have a lot of bad feelings about a person who will not let you get away with the fact that this thing exists. You know, it's like for Julius, with the blood sucking.
Yeah.
The life sucking that you do out of other people. When I'm with you, I'm not letting you get away with it. Right? And that then feels uncompromising, it feels unloving. You feel you should get away with it. You feel that someone who loves you should let you get away with it. Someone who loves you would just be kind about it. It would be, it's not that bad, Julius. And encourage you around it. But actually it's really bad and you shouldn't do it. And that's how a person who's uncompromising will be. That's how God is with you. He says, he's really saying to Julius, if you could hear the conscience on the matter of you taking things from people all the time, if you could hear the conscience on it, God would be saying, there it goes again, Julius, you're wrong. There it goes again, Julius, you're wrong. There it goes again, you're wrong. And a person who's on earth connected to God, they're going to do the same with you. There you go again, Julius, and you're wrong. Does that make sense?
So it's really, because the confusion is basically like, is it this not getting the addiction met, or where is it that I fear, that I dread God, and I'm not sure if God will be kind with me too. So it's not so much about me having been judged or attacked. It's much less. It's
all that you want your addiction.
Yeah.
And God doesn't want to give it to you.
Ah, okay. Well,
and so you don't think He's nice. Does that make sense? Because you think people are nice when they give you your addiction, and so your measure of love is people are nice when they give me what I want, and particularly if they give me their addiction, and God's going, I'm not giving you it ever. And you go, God's the most cross person in the universe. He doesn't ever give me my addiction. How unkind is that? What about my guides? Sometimes what you call your guides are not your guides, because the spirits who give you what you want are not your guides.
Or who set up opportunities for you to suck blood.
You have spirits who set up opportunities where they notice somebody will give. So your relationship just a few weeks ago with Yvette, they know Yvette has a tendency to feel a bit of guilt and feel the need to give something. So the spirits with you go, I'll contact Yvette. Yvette, can you arrange some accommodation for me? Now, why aren't you arranging your own? From God's perspective, you not arranging your own is already out of harmony with love, right? But you're asking Yvette to, because the spirits with you have already said to you, Yvette will do it for me, right? So they're actually playing on Yvette's injury, which is actually a very dark thing to do. It's very dark to manipulate a person's injury against them. So Yvette goes running around, ringing up her friends, helping you, through her addiction, of course. So she doesn't want to just say, no, Julius, work it out yourself, right? Because then she feels like she's being the bad woman if she does that. So she's in that addiction now. So she runs around, arranges it with a friend, so it comes back to you, said, all arranged, it's all good. And then a week later, or however time later, you're saying, I don't want it anymore. Now, of course you don't want it anymore because you found something better in your mind, and because you have no level of commitment to the thing you've already agreed to, right? Which are also quite bad injuries, actually, emotional injuries, right? So, but the spirits are going, you don't have to worry about that. Yvette will be fine. So you ring up Yvette and say, are you fine if I counsel? And Yvette, of course, is going to go, yeah, no worries, right? Because that's her addiction, right? She's going to go, of course, no worries. But she's wrong again, because it was a worry. Like,
and she spent a lot of energy
to do it. And then also, so her friend is going to be upset now because she had an arrangement in the middle of a peak season with a person that she thought was going to be in her accommodation, and now they're not. Now she's got to find someone else for that accommodation in the middle of a peak season. So if you were loving, you would have known all that, and you would also know that Yvette was going to do that, and that it wouldn't be right to even ask her to do it. You follow me? Yep. But because you're going, oh no, it's just a self-motivation, I'm just going to get what I want. And you tell yourself things like, oh, she'll do it. She said it was okay.
Yeah.
Right? She said it was okay. And but actually, whether she thinks it's okay or not, or says to you it's okay, even if she thinks differently, at the end of the day, it wasn't okay from God's perspective. And even if Yvette absolves you from your unloving behaviour, God hasn't.
Yeah.
You follow?
God's standard is measuring.
So that sin is still in your soul now.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to repent for it at some point in the future. And then also find its cause. Find the reason why you thought you could do that. And it seems like a little thing to you. If it didn't seem like a little thing, you wouldn't have done it, right? Yep. So it does seem like a little thing to you. But actually, it's quite a big thing. Because there's a lot of issues of not taking self-responsibility, not being loving to Yvette, not being loving to the friend of Yvette's who provided you the accommodation, not, looking for whatever is expedient for yourself, which is fundamentally selfishness. And so there's a whole standard of love of God's that you're neglecting in that interaction. And it's just and for you, it's just like, it's just a simple interaction. And then remember 2 days ago when Mary raised it with you, you went defensive. You go, but Yvette said it was okay. And you were trying to blame Yvette there for your own unloving behaviour, which means you've committed another sin from God's perspective, and that is trying to blame somebody else for their injury for the reason why you took advantage of them. Right?
And I had the same thing with England, because I was like so driven, like what I believe by my lack. So I was just like wanting to, and I just wrote a small email.
You keep calling it your lack. It's your lack of desire to be self-responsible and get a job and get some money and sort out your life. You want to live off of everybody else. Right? So you call it my lack.
It's like basically
you're creating your own lack.
Yeah, and because I'm not stepping in to create that all myself.
That's right, but you're creating your own lack, and then you blame your lack for making these bad, unloving choices.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that I did that in England too, and Anna McDonald, she quite kindly actually pointed me out on that, and
good on her.
And that was a big helping stone.
You know why Anna did that? Because when she visited Australia, months ago, we had a number of very long conversations with her about how tolerant she is of men's bad behaviour towards her. But if we hadn't have done that, she would probably have done what you wanted. Yeah. So, this is something where it really requires a lot of self-awareness and a desire for self-awareness. But also you can see it requires a lot of desire to meet God's standard of love rather than your own.
To do the right thing.
To do the right thing as God defines it, not as you define it. See, you define, getting somebody else, particularly a woman, to tee up your life for you, you define that as fine. And you also define cutting that arrangement at a whim fine as well. Now, God finds both of those things actually quite evil, to be frank. Right? So, what we often think, I'm a nice guy, and this is what you do a lot with the women. You're friendly and you've got a nice outgoing demeanour generally, Julius, haven't you? And so the average woman, when she meets a friendly, quite nice outgoing man, she thinks he's a nice guy. But you're not being a nice guy. You know? Now, God is already trying to say that to you. And because you don't want to hear it, you think God's nasty.
Oh, wow.
Does that make sense? And then when I say it to you, you can see I've got a smile on my face while I'm saying it, but I'm serious.
I know.
Yeah, I'm serious.
Yeah.
But you, because I'm kind saying it, you think I'm kinder than God. But that's not true. God's kinder than I am. God's infinitely kind. Right? So can you see the person who is actually trying to tell you the most direct manner is God, is the very person you're trying to ignore.
So when I even struggle with your kindness, then I'll have a lot more trouble with hearing it from God.
Because God's going to draw the line with you, like one of the things I'm learning in my own progress now, because one of the things I used to do in the past in this life, not in the first century, as Mary knows, in the first century, I was like, you know, down the line on everything, and everybody who met me either wanted to chuck me off a cliff or would listen. It was basically fundamentally one of those two things. It was the average. You know, there were many times when a whole mob got hold of me and tried to throw me off a cliff, and it was only my mother saying I was nuts or something that stopped them, right? So in the first century, quite frequently that occurred because I was down the line. What I'm learning, the more close I get to God now, going through the processes I'm going now, get rid of sin, the more down the line I'm becoming. As you probably would know, if you knew me 10 years ago and know me now, you know I'm a lot more down the line, right? And the more I progress towards God, the more that will be the case. But interestingly, most people think I'm getting more obnoxious. Yeah?
So, like, for example, when you smiled at me in the break yesterday, like, is that smile like that? It's almost like it brought up that, well, kind of a guilt maybe. So it was you, like, kind of...
Yeah, you don't understand, but what I'm trying to do emotionally with you is I'm trying to say, here's some emotional boundaries, Julius. And when I smile at you, I'm setting these emotional barriers with you and observing to whether you can feel them or not. Yeah. Most people can't, obviously, and then I've got to say something, of course. But when you do observe them, then of course I think it's great because it means you're being more emotionally sensitive. Yeah. Let's go.
I was wondering.
No, I just wanted to say Simone has her hand up. Do you still want to?
I know, but we're there next and then Simone.
I'm just telling Elsie to go to Simone.
I was wondering, how would you know the difference between if you have a thing in your body or a sickness, if it's a spirit attachment or if it's blocked emotion and process?
Well, all spirit attachments
yeah.
are emotional anyway.
Yeah.
So if you solve the emotion, you will solve whether it's your emotion or the spirit attachment anyway.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not as complicated as you're worrying about.
Yeah.
It's actually much more simple. It's just a matter of always focus on the emotion. It's always the emotion that causes the problem. And any spirit attachment that is there because of the emotion will also dissipate when you deal with emotion.
So it actually doesn't really matter. Just deal with the emotion.
Correct. Yeah. And one thing I must say to all of you before we start channeling is this. The spirits are just people. They're no different than the average, people on earth. On people on earth, you get some really evil people sometimes, don't you? Some people who are very malicious and desirous of harming others and selfish and so forth. And then you get some nice people too, who are very kind and considerate and want to try to help you out and those kind of things too. So it's the same with spirits. They're all in different conditions. And in fact, most celestial spirits, and there's now millions of them, most celestial spirits spend more time on earth than they do in the hells of the spirit world because they recognise that people can be helped more on earth than generally they can be in the hells of the spirit world. So there is a lot of positive assistance there's a lot of people who want to help you become more in alignment with those principles we put on the board yesterday, you know, love, truth, humility, faith. There's a lot of people who want to help you do it. It's not like you're without assistance. But there's also quite a lot of dark spirits who want to just get their addiction out of you. And the key for you is to deal with your addictions, deal with the emotions that drive your addictions, because they are the causes of your addictions. And then if you do that, whatever spirit was attached to that addiction, he's going to have to go. You'll actually have alleviations of body symptoms through the process. So, and you'll fundamentally cure most of your own illnesses. And if you deal with it to the point of it one with God on earth, you'll cure them all. But every bit of progress you make will result in a satisfactory result, bodily, but also a satisfactory result when it comes to the spirits that are influencing you.
Yeah, and if there's something that is kind of generational, so if it's going back, so is that more, yeah, because I feel there's something there.
Yeah, family. Most people on earth are more connected to their families, even their families who have passed, than they are to anybody else.
Yeah, but a sickness that is generational.
So I understand.
So if a family member has an injury,
yeah,
that injury gets passed down. If it exhibits itself in a bodily way, in a sickness, that same sickness will be passed down.
It's interesting because often, illness shows up in our body as a result of us not dealing with emotion. And obviously in your family line, there's patterns of emotions that are not dealt with, traumas, but also just belief systems that are emotional and so on. And so very often that causes like when the doctor takes your family history, there's a strong history of heart disease or what have you.
Breast cancer.
Or cancer or what have you. And often it's because of those emotional injuries that are being passed down. But it's often compounded by the fact that your ancestors are very interested in you. And if you do have similar emotions to you, sometimes they hang around you or your kids, and that can heighten the disease process in your body because they're actually trying to sort of intermingle with your spirit body, if you like, and they haven't dealt with the issue in themselves. So often it's like Jesus said, it's not really one or the other. Many times it's both. But
almost every onset of child sicknesses, particularly ones that are death-threatening like cancers, if they're happening to a child, almost in every case, it's an overcloaking from a family spirit. Almost every case. Yeah. And if you get rid of the family spirit, the child has a potential of recovery. So, but for adults, obviously the addictions are well established, and so therefore it's much more difficult to help the adult cure the same problem.
Yeah, I have this thing, it's not a sickness, but it's a situation in the body for 11 years, which I can see there's grandmother, mother, me, and I'm determined to sort this out, like emotionally, or not go and do the operation to fix it, but sort it out, so it won't go down to my daughter. And I've been trying to connect to God because it's hard to find. I mean, I've tried so many ways to.
Can I just say a few things about sickness? We don't want to spend a lot of time on it today because we do want to do some channeling, but one thing that must be said about sickness is this: by the time the sickness exhibits itself in your physical body, the emotional sickness is well, solidified, right? So what happens, the dynamic with sicknesses, and particularly diseases, that cause death, is that the emotion that is in the soul causes a damage to the energy systems of the spirit body, and the energy systems of the spirit body control the energy systems of the physical body, and as a result of that, the physical body starts exhibiting problems in those areas. And in terms of curing the problems properly, there's two methods of curing it. One is to ask the spirit to cure it for you, and there are some spirits who will do that, but none of them will be divine love spirits because they know the cause is not dealt with in you. The alternative is to deal with it, work through the emotions that cause the interruption to the systems, and that requires a lot more like focus on the emotion. So in other words, a denied emotion is going to cause a sickness. A denied sickness is going to cause death. You follow?
Yeah.
So what some people do is like they do get pre-cancerous conditions, for example, and they don't want to deal with the emotion, and they also don't want to deal with the condition. They're going to die, for sure, because their own body system is killing them. Their own body system's energy is not maintaining itself enough to continue the state of recovery of the cell structures and all of you know, of course, that your body, most of your body cells are different every 7 years. You know that, right?
Yeah.
So you know, and some cells in your body are actually different every 3 months. Like some parts of your body recover themselves within months. Things like your skin recovers very, very rapidly. You're losing skin all the time, and your body's producing skin all the time to replace the skin you're losing. And the same goes with sort of flesh-based injuries. A lot of those things happen within a few months or less. Other things like bone structures, 7 years before they are generally replaced. But your whole body is different every 7 years, right? The whole body. So if you think about that, you can see that your emotion, if illness lasts any longer than 7 years, that means the emotion must be there, causing that to continue.
Yeah.
Right? Once you get rid of the emotions, the very worst conditions that you can face should be 7 years cured, once the emotions are gone. You follow me?
Yeah.
Yep. And if they're not, then it means the emotions are not gone.
Yeah.
Simple.
Well, it's improving, but it's this. I still haven't. The emotion is not like it's not totally cured. So it's just like yeah.
Yeah. Now, what I see a lot of people do on Earth, of course, is they want quick fixes to everything, and so they're not patient with their body, and they're not patient with their emotions, and they don't focus very much on their emotions anyway, because most of us are taught emotions are the very worst things you can feel, particularly bad ones. And so what we do generally is we start deny the emotion is the general course of action, and then try to fix the problem medically. That's the general philosophy. Of course, the emotion is going to continue causing the problem unless you actually remove completely the organ that the problem where the emotion is stored. So like, I've got breast cancer, let's say. There's 2 courses of action. I can deal with the emotion that causes it, and within a maximum of 7 years it will be gone if I deal with the emotion. That's the maximum. Usually with cancers, it's like a month, 2 months, gone, if you deal with the emotion. But if you deny the emotion, now the only course of action to you if you want to survive, depending on the intensity of the emotion you're denying, if it's intense, the only course of action that if you want to survive, is to have that part of your body removed.
Yeah, then it might go to a different
somewhere
part.
else
Yeah,
then, in that case.
Well, it can go somewhere else, but oftentimes not. Oftentimes the person goes, right, cancer, they call it remission, right? You're in remission now. It's like there's no cancer in your body now, because that then causes the doctor to believe we've got everything. But the reality is the energy system surrounding that area, because of your emotional state, is still a problem. Now that's also going to attract some spirits who are attracted to that particular injury in you. So it's also a spiritual problem, because there's going to be spirits who are sucking energy out of that area of your body as well, because they like the addiction you're in to keep that addiction. So now you've got a spiritual problem still there, and the potential of it widening in its scope in that area because of the lack of energy entering that area from your spirit body. And as a result of that, from your soul via your spirit body. And as a result of that, you'll end up getting sick down the track anyway, most often. Yep. So probably that's about as much as I'd like to say about physical illness today. We've talked about that there's hundreds of hours of videos on our site about physical illnesses and the cures to physical illnesses and so forth. But it's very important to understand the dynamic that if you shut down your soul And by the way, it's not only with bad emotions. You can shut down your soul with a desire, and you can cause a physical sickness in your body. Because there's certain chakras, certain energy systems in your spirit body that are dependent upon desire. And unless you have them, you will shut down those areas, and then you'll be prone to sicknesses in those areas. Does that make sense? So all through my childhood, for example, I've had a problem with my bowel right from the time of birth, because I've been attacked by spirits through my bowel. I've had a part of my bowel removed, and when I was 18 months old, and there's spirit attachments that I've only just started getting rid of, actually, the last few months, getting rid of those attachments. And as I'm, but at the beginning, their intention was to kill me via problems in my bowel, right? So, and that's been their intention all of my life, and I've felt this attack all of my life, this constant attack by lots of spirits. And, you know, on the average, I'd have 2 or 3 million spirits attacking me every day. So for lots of different reasons, but mostly because they want me dead, right? So they're trying to kill me in lots of different ways. So any hole I have in my body, they're in, right? And I've had this big hole relating to attack and feeling worth problems from a very young age that I'm now only in the process of getting rid of. And as a result of that, if I suppress those emotions, that again gives them a greater opening to harm that area of my body. So for most of my life, that area of my body has been continually harmed. I've had to go and I've never done any other medical procedures by my own choice, but they were forced upon me in my childhood. But as a result of those medical procedures, I have more problems than I would now have if I didn't have those procedures. But it's taken me, you got to get to the stage where you realize denial of emotion causes these problems.
I realize that. I just can't find the emotion.
You don't want to. There's a difference between I can't and don't want to. You can, because remember, God created you to find out everything.
Yeah, I haven't so far. No.
You haven't yet got a strong enough desire, shall we say, to find the emotion. That's the way to look at it. Okay. Not that I can't.
No, you're right.
You understand?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
When you say you can't, you're basically saying it's out of your control.
Yeah.
And all this is in your control.
It is. Yeah.
So when you say I can't do it, you're telling yourself it's all out of my control. There's all something magical happening around me that causes this to happen, and that's not the case at all. You were created perfect, and the only reason why there's a degradation from perfect is because of emotion that gets stored, sinful emotions. And by the way, these are not just hurts from your childhood. These are sins you've committed in your life have a degradation emotionally inside of you that you then refuse to feel. So you know that we talked about, was it Friday or Saturday, about guilt versus shame. Guilt is God's laws condemning you for doing something wrong, right? And saying you're guilty. Now, if you deny guilt, you will find you will end up with big, severe physical problems, right? And because the process of denying guilt is denying sin, and denying sin causes huge physical problems. Most people on earth don't realise that many of our physical problems on earth are because we're denying sin inside of us. So it requires, again, some courage to look at it and go, what is my sin? What sins are causing this problem? Yeah. So breast cancer, for example, is a sin. If it's on the right side, it's caused by your desire to nurture men to your own detriment. To their detriment too, by the way. And it's a selfish desire to nurture men because you don't want to feel the feeling of guilt, right? So if you deal with that emotionally, breast cancer cured. All spirit attachments to the right breast, cured. Yep, all spiritual attachments. So these diseases, so-called life-threatening diseases, all of them can be cured. It just requires a desire to find the emotion. And most of the time, what I find, particularly with life-threatening disease, most people don't want to find it. They'd rather die than find the emotion. We've had friends that have died who have heard divine truth, and we've taught them we've even talked to them about what the emotion is and they still don't want to feel it, and they've died. Yep. Yep. Some of them under 40 died. Yep. So don't neglect the dealing of the emotion, and don't ever tell you can't. Don't ever do that.
It's not life-threatening, but I can.
It doesn't matter life-threatening or not.
No. But I need to say that for myself.
Yeah.
and I will, but I probably need to focus more on the emotion than on other stuff that I've maybe focused on.
And focus more on what you're trying to shut down. Not on trying to find the reason, but try to find the reason why you don't know the reason. Mm-hmm. Because the real problems are not necessarily the emotions themselves, but all the wrapping layers you put around the emotion to protect yourself from the emotion.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, your terror of the emotion. You know, focus there first, and eventually you'll get to the emotion if you do that. Yeah. But that's probably all I want to say on the physical side of things. Yep. We're across at Simone.
So, my question came up when we spoke about compromise with Julius.
Yes.
Because I oftentimes find myself not knowing what the best way is, especially I find in this world where every option I have seems to be flawed, and I don't know which one to go for. If I drive a car, it's not good for the environment. If I fly, it's not good. Everything has got flaws involved, which I don't know how to get around often.
Yes.
It's not black and white.
Well,
or I don't see it. Or I don't see an option, maybe.
A lot of things are more black and white than what you think, though.
Exactly.
And also, a lot of things are more black and white than you would like. So let's look at those two things, shall we? Firstly, being more black and white than you think. Remember, we wrote, I'll rub this off the board actually. Everyone's right with those sources of spirit stuff. And this will be my last personal question because we want to get on to some channeling, don't we? Okay, so it's a good question, and we just want to probably address it a bit. We're faced with a decision. Most of us don't like making decisions. Isn't that true? Because for the most part, we believe, just like you have said, Simone, that every decision seems to have pros and cons, and then it's like you weigh up the pros, weigh up the cons, and oftentimes they're almost equal, and what do you do then? Right? So for most of us, that's the way we think. However, if you look back at the principles, right, that we're trying to develop. And I'm holding steadfast to these principles with every decision I make. So, decision comes up. Do I fly or drive? Well, why am I going anywhere in the first place? Is it acting out of love to go there? Is it acting in humility to go there? So an example of that is, I want a holiday. How do I get to the place where I want to go for the holiday? Do I drive, fly, take the train, take a bus? What do I do? Right? So you can see firstly the holiday decision. I want a holiday. The very first thing I would need to do is ask myself, why do I want the holiday? Is the purpose of my holiday to get away from my current life? Because if it is, I'm not being humble. And if it is, I'm not being truthful with myself. That I'm just going on a holiday to get away from things, to get away from my responsibilities, the decisions that I need to make in my current life. Under those circumstances, I will not go on a holiday, even if I want one. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Because it's the wrong decision. the right decision would be for me to be more humble, more honest with myself, and deal with my life. Sort out why my life doesn't feel like a holiday. And I know you know that your life doesn't feel like a holiday to you, right? Correct. Yeah. So naturally, you would like to be with your husband and the children. Where are they now? In England somewhere, or Scotland somewhere? England. Rather than here, right?
Well, I'm quite happy right here, right now. That was my priority, so I chose to be here.
Yes, but what was the reason for the choice?
One big one was to come and see you.
Well, that's a good choice, because that's going to help you with these things, right? You didn't know that, though, did you? That it was going to help you with these things necessarily.
I had a hunch.
You had a hunch. but yeah, good choice. But at the end of the day, whenever you have the ability to learn about these things, certainly that should be a very high priority in your life. Do whatever is going to bring you more of these things. Because the more of these things you get, the happier you're going to be, the more you'll learn, the more it'll benefit your life. But if the holiday is to avoid my life, then I should stick around and fix my life so that I don't feel like I need holiday. If you think of the whole idea or concept of a holiday, most of the time for most people is, I've got to get away from all this pressure and all this day-to-day mundane and all this, all this other thing that's going on in my life. You must be driven nuts sometimes by the fact that 4 days a week you're kneading bread and getting...
It's actually Tom doing it.
He's away now, but you have to do it. So the consistency of the pressures gets to most people, is what I'm illustrating. And so they go, let's get away from it for a week, and then when I come back I'll feel better. That's not a good reason for a holiday. A better reason for a holiday was, I'm going on holiday because I need some time away from my life to assess my life and work out what I'm doing wrong and right, out of harmony with love, truth, humility, faith, what I'm doing out wrong or right about those things. So if I take a holiday for that purpose, that's a fantastic purpose for my holiday. If I'm just taking a holiday just so that I can go and visit other pretty places and take from them, that's a very selfish holiday, right? God doesn't agree with that holiday, actually. You follow? Mm-hmm. And this is something we observed in Austria in particular. We were staying in the Alps because it was right next to a venue, right? So we're staying there, and everybody else is there for a holiday, and they'll just take from the environment. It was so bad. They all got their dogs and their cats with them as well, taking from the environment as well. And it was interesting because in the brochures that we read about the Alps where we were, which were just south of Innsbruck, and they said it was a pristine environment. Absolute crap. It was so damaged, the environment. It was like in the whole time we were there, we might have saw maybe 6 birds or 10 birds, maybe maximum 10, maybe. We went for an 18-kilometre bushwalk and saw 2 birds. In 18 kilometres. That's how little life there was there. It's so damaged by people who would just take. And everyone's saying, isn't it so wonderful here? Oh, the view's magnificent. And the view is terrible. In the sense that if you actually saw the view from God's perspective, you would think it's terrible. But everyone's going, it's so better than where we live, and of course it might be, but the purpose of the holidays they were taking wasn't to assess life, wasn't to give themselves time to reflect, wasn't to provide a feeling of relaxation, because they're too busy going up and down lifts all day to actually have any time. And it's funny, we were watching different couples and families in the lifts even, because we went up and down a couple of them, because we had a free pass given to us. So we went up and down a couple of them, and they were in this beautiful, pristine environment. That was the general look. right? So the purpose of their holiday was just to get a holiday, obviously, and to say they'd had a holiday in the Alps, because it didn't seem to be any other good purpose to it at all. Now, under those circumstances, you can see if I measured it by love, truth, humility and faith, that holiday should never be taken. Right? So it even gets down to simple things like taking a holiday. Now, let's say my motive for taking the holiday is a good one. I want to assess my life. I want to look at things. I want to look at what I can change to make my life more in harmony with God's principles, but also more in harmony with my joy. You know, making sure that I actually enjoy my life. Because one of God's requirements, by the way, for you is that He wants you to enjoy your life. He doesn't want you to just, every day. You know? In fact, if you don't learn to enjoy your life on earth, and you are like this on earth all day, every day, thinking, I'm going to do that soon, I've got to go to work today. Right? What's going to happen by the time you pass into the spirit world, you are going to be like that in the spirit world. You won't have a desire to, you'll be like, there's all these other spheres, so what? That's what you'll be like. You will. I'm guaranteeing you. I know it sounds funny, but this is how it is. And you'll be like that. If you don't learn how to enjoy your life on earth now and enjoy life all the time and choose to have pursuits that are actually not only going to work here on earth but also work when you're in the spirit world, so quite often I talk about people who are like a lawyer. Now I do know judges and lawyers in the spirit world who are fascinated about God's law and they've spent a lot of time studying it. But when they passed, the very first thing they felt is, what do I do now? There's no lawyering here. Nobody needs to be represented. God's laws have got everything under control. What's my purpose in life? They don't know what to do. And frequently, many of them stay in that state for hundreds of years because they just know that's what they did on earth, and that brought them a sense of satisfaction, and they don't know what to do. So it's very important you on earth choose to do something that's in harmony with these things with your life. You do it with passion and joy, and you learn to live a life of passion and joy while you're here. That's a very important part of your life. Now, if your holiday is for the purpose of you discovering what those joys are, getting rid of the things in your life that don't bring you joy, and really working on that, then the holiday is a great holiday. You should take it. Right? For sure. Of course, if you go to the middle of London and go into a high-rise building for your holiday, I don't know whether you're going to be very reflective in that space about what I just said, about taking stock of your life. You're probably more likely going to need to be by the beach, but Simone, you're already by the beach, aren't you? Like your normal day-to-day life is by the beach. Like you're only like how many k's away did we walk? About 4 to the beach. Yeah. People come and stay in your house to get a holiday. So that should tell you something too, shouldn't it? It should tell you your house is probably a really good place to start to look at your life and say, why am I feeling like it's hard and difficult? So firstly, it's about decisions. You asked about decisions. I'm saying good decisions are those that help you develop these qualities and also adjust your life to develop these qualities. So when Mary and I decide to come on a trip, we are very aware that there are carbon problems with getting here.
And while we're here.
I
don't like having a plastic water bottle. I don't like having disposable batteries. None of these things we have at home.
No.
They're costs and we have to weigh them,
Yeah.
But isn't that compromise?
No. My focus is to teach love, truth and humility. I know God wants me to do that. These tools help me do that. I need them.
Okay, so that's how kind of I understand compromise.
See, that's not a compromise to me. That's me engaging these principles. The purpose of my trip to here is not a holiday, right? It's to share truth with you. The purpose of my trip here is to expose God's truth. And any of you who've heard it over the last 3 days, you know it is pretty fascinating, right? to hear it. Hardly anybody on earth hears it, right? So Mary and I, we want to share it. So I'm going, even with all of the problems associated with getting here, this ideal is higher than those problems. Now, Mary and I do things to mitigate those problems. So in other words, we have planted thousands of trees and designed systems for thousands of trees to grow on any property that we're responsible for, right? So what that means is we have already offsetted our own carbon in the trip. So that's helped. When we go to a place like yours, Simone, we ask you, can we get a spade and dig up your garden and put all our waste there? So you'll find when we leave your home, you won't come there and have to move any waste, right? Where we can be responsible, this is what we do, right? Because we use all of our waste. At home we even use our own poo and our own wee and everything. Like, we use our own waste to create like better things, like in harmony with these principles. But we are aware that we have to hire a car or borrow somebody's car to get around in different places. A lot of the places we visit are like, by nature, they have to be out of the way, because most time in the middle of a city, nobody wants to hear. So we have to travel to sort of places, and that takes resources, time, money. On this trip, Mary and I, we were saving up to build a house for ourselves, because we are giving our house to the God's Way organisation, which is a non-profit organisation, and they haven't got an office at the moment. We want to give our house as the office, but in order to do that, we have to build a house. So we've been saving up for 13 years to build a house, but we had to use some of that money, 30,000 euros of that money we had to use for the trip, because we didn't have enough donations to cover the trip. So we had to use that money to do this trip. But this trip is more important than our house, because it's teaching these things. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to, do I keep the money for our house or do I use it for a trip? There's no compromise. It's like, no, the trip, because this is more important. There's priorities, and these are the priorities. So you'll find if you take this approach with your life, that everything you do, you'll be able to look at the priority and you go, no, this priority is loving, this priority is truthful, this priority helps me be humble, this priority helps me grow in faith, this priority is better. It must be done. What resources are at my disposal to make it happen? I need to make it happen, because it's more in harmony with these things. The more in harmony with these things we do things, the more chance there is of change in the world in a positive direction. See, humans have had the capacity for the last probably close to 120 years to have completely non-polluting energy sources. They've been known about for over 120 years on Earth. And yet we're still driving the same combustion engines that they invented, right? With slight modifications over the 120 years of technology, but we're still driving the same ones. There's been no progress because of why? It's because people don't want to make more loving choices. The vehicle manufacturers, they're faced with a decision. Do I make a combustion engine based upon oil, or do I make it based upon water? Right? I knew a man when I was about 23. I met a man and he ran his car on water. It was a combustion engine, but it ran on water. I went for a drive in it. Yeah. So the technology is there, but why don't we have it? We don't have it because
we all don't desire it enough.
Well, a big part is because industries and governments and companies want to make profit, and they can't make profit off of water. If you can just pour some water in your car, right, and get it going, then of course they're not going to be able to sell you petrol. So they don't want that to happen. So they try to suppress all of that information as well, naturally. Of course they do, because they're not motivated by this. They're motivated by profit, right? But
with us, no?
yeah, many of us are motivated by profit, if you think about it. Saving money, or getting shares, or, buying digital currency and waiting for it to go up and then reaping the rewards of that from no effort. It's a common human failing that we're motivated by profit. So Mary and I are not motivated by profit. If we were motivated by profit, we would do no travelling whatsoever, probably, because travelling is costly, as you
Well, we wouldn't
know.
do what we're doing, actually.
No, if you're motivated by profit, you couldn't do it, right? If you're motivated by love, truth, humility and faith, and that becomes your motivation, then every decision becomes easy, because you just ask yourself, is it going to improve one of those things or more of those things? So an example, I think you asked us when we first saw you, just briefly, you mentioned about you helping an older lady with her life. But when we felt you ask about it, you felt quite drained by having to do this constantly, even though you also felt love for her and a feeling that you wanted to do it. So, in that, there's love of self versus love of the other person. Now, from God's perspective, you are equal. If you're spending more time loving her than you are yourself, then from God's perspective, you're out of line.
Spot on.
Sorry?
Spot on.
Yeah. So change it. Now, changing it requires courage, because she might get upset, right?
Yeah.
Or you might feel guilty.
Absolutely.
Or ashamed of the decision. It's really shame. But humility will help you feel your shame. And her humility, if she has any, will help her feel her anger. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You need to get it, make the decision so that it's balanced. It's lovely to help people, but not at the constant expense of self. Now, one thing I'd like to say to many of you women in the audience, you have been taught even more than men that being a mother and being a wife, you've got to keep giving, right? Do you have as much fun in your life as what your sons and your husband have?
Do I have to answer that? No.
Now, it's interesting, even, do I have to answer that? Like, it's sort of like, do I really want to know the truth about that? But for most women, the answer would be no. Now, that's the problem. You need to sit down your husband and your sons and say, I am not getting as much fun in my life as you are. You guys are going to have to pick up some of the slack here, because I should be able to have as much fun in my life as you have in yours.
And sometimes
That's equality.
Sometimes women don't even know what's fun for me, because you've spent your whole life. So you have to go on that process of discovery too.
Yeah. And in that process, you'll feel guilty, and they will make you feel guilty too, by the way. They'll say, oh, Mum's becoming more selfish. Not realising that they've been selfish for the last whatever years, right? Yeah. So of course that will have to be addressed, and that requires your humility, because you're going to have to say, here's the reason why I did it for 20 years, is because when I start talking about it with them, they're all like upset now, and I just wanted to avoid the fact that they'd all be upset against me. Yep. And in your case, I think you got 2 boys, haven't you?
Boy and a girl.
Boy and a girl, right. But both of them are pretty demanding on your time, right? The girl less than the boy.
No, the girl much more than the boy.
No.
Really?
You do more for the boy.
Really?
The girl's more demanding on your time, in the sense of verbally demanding.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't see what you're doing for the boy.
Well, that's true.
Without him speaking.
Without him speaking, he doesn't have to speak. Yep. You do things for him without speaking. You expect more from your daughter too. You expect her to participate more in the preparation of meals, and participate more in helping you. So you're teaching your daughter also to sacrifice herself for the sake of the boys.
I don't want to do that.
Well, you do want to do that because you feel guilt if you don't do that. But that's something humility will help you cure, right? But so what you view as a compromise, I sort of view as a decision. Are you going to do the more loving thing, the more truthful thing, the more humble thing, the thing that requires faith in God's way, have more faith in God's way? If you do it, you're worried that your husband will be upset with you, your kids will be upset with you, because obviously it's not balanced. They have more fun than you do. So it's not balanced, right? You're going to have to say something to them. And in saying something to them, they've never heard mum say this, probably, in their entire life. It's sort of like, they'll be shocked. How dare you, And if they have some level of self-reflection, they go, oh, you're right. You're dead right, mum. That's very true. We go off on our holiday and you stay home and work, So that they'll recognise that. Although, as you know, when they go off on a holiday, you feel like, oh, I'm having a holiday too. And that's the problem too, because your day-to-day life is not a holiday. It's not, in a sense, it's not evenly equitable in terms of love in particular for self, but also even love of them, teaching them that they are more important than you are. Right? Now that requires you to adhere to these principles more. If you adhere to the principles more, the decision becomes more obvious. So instead of being a long list of pros and a long list of cons every time, you'll find there might be one, you might have a long list of like cons to make a decision, and one pro. Now, if that's the pro, truth, then all the cons are immaterial. Truth is the way it needs to go. If love of self and others equally is the decision, doesn't matter what cons there are, anger, resentment, people being upset with you, all that other stuff, doesn't matter. Because love requires that you learn that love for yourself is to be equal to your love of others. So if you can learn that, then, and you've learnt that one lesson, your life is going to be immeasurably happier. Right? So there might be a whole heap of cons, which might be everyone's going to criticise me, everyone's going to think I'm being selfish, but they're just feelings. They're just where you need to be humble and just feel them. They're just feelings. Love is more important than you feeling your feelings. Right? When I say more important than, your feelings are like ant emotions. Love is like the giant emotion of the universe. Your feelings of like guilt that you're not, that when people say, Simone, you're not being loving to me, when someone sort of implies that with you, your feeling of guilt that comes, or shame that comes along when they say that, that's an ant emotion. You can handle it. Love is a bigger emotion. Love of self, bigger emotion. It definitely needs to be developed. So every decision, if it's focused firstly on these principles, will become clear to you. And yes, in the world today, there are all sorts of problems, and there's all sorts of compromise that the world is doing about those problems. But if this becomes our uncompromising reality, a lot of those other problems get solved. So like if a car manufacturer said, we're going to focus our entire business on love, truth, humility and faith. We're going to have some faith that we can find a technology that is non-polluting. We're going to be humble enough to realise that we don't know what it is, and that we've got to go searching, and we've got to do research, and we've got to put some funds into that. We've got to face the truth that if we want to do anything else other than that, we're going to damage the environment. And love requires that I don't damage the environment. Now, if a car manufacturer did that, how long do you think it would take? And I'm saying if every car manufacturer, did that, how long do you think it would take for them to work out how to create a vehicle that's pollution-free?
Really, not long.
Not long at all. Not long at all, right? But when they say but we want to make profit for our shareholders now. And remember, shareholders are just people who paid a bit of money and expect somebody else to do the work. That's what they are. They're people who want to get money off the back of other people's work, which is, by the way, very unloving. Right? So by them focusing on their shareholders, they're basically saying, by focusing on giving profits to my shareholders, I'm focusing on an unloving outcome. The unloving outcome being people are getting a return without doing any work. That's unloving. If I focus all of my attention on giving profits to my shareholders, then I'm immediately out of harmony with love with the principles. And so am I going to want to then develop a vehicle that is actually good for the environment or good for my shareholders? So what most companies on earth now decide is good for my shareholders. And they don't care about the environment. Right? But if you could see, if they had this focus, they could change that. Right? Anything that focuses on this is going to make life for you and everyone around you better.
Thank you. That answers it beautifully.
Yeah. So my suggestion for all of you when you come up with a decision is to not neglect the principles. Every decision, minor, tiny decisions, right the way through to major ones. Don't neglect the principles. Make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully that's taught you how to make decisions rather than telling you what decision to make when you go on a holiday. Okay. Well, I think, shall we just have a brief break so people can go to the toilet and stuff, and then we'll do some channeling. All right?